thank you very much for inviting me here to talk about manufacturing, and I'll talk a little bit about my new role as co-chair of the Regional Economic Development Council, which recently was announced. I'm excited about, but it's a lot of work too. It's all volunteer, by the way, no money. So don't you love those kinds of jobs? So I'll make this as informal as you'd like to make it.
Please.
So please, you can just raise your hand. You want to shout out a question anytime. That's fine. I don't need to make it too formal. I go to do a lot of formal presentations. It's a lot nicer not to have to. I did give you, unfortunately, I didn't make them per slide because I have 64 of them, I think. So I did 2 per page. And so it's a little bit of small print. I apologize for some of the slides, but I have them in larger form that you can see, you can ask me questions about. I just always figure it's best to give you as much information as you would like, and then we can answer questions around it. I'm not doing it today, but I've started to run a video, a small clip, of the 4th Industrial Revolution. Because we're in the 4th Industrial Revolution right now. You all remember the 1st Industrial Revolution. You remember about it. Well, we're on the 4th generation of that. And what you're going to see going on in manufacturing today, even for someone like me, is absolutely remarkable. What's happening in technology and manufacturing is beyond most people's wildest imaginations even 10 years ago. It's really changed the whole opportunity that exists for communities like ours and throughout the world. And that's what I'm most excited about. I remember coming to MACNY, the Manufacturers Association, in 2001. I got there October 1st of 2001. If you remember something, we all know something tragic happened September 11th. I happened to be signing my contract to join MACNY on the same morning that the towers came down. And I remember going into my position October 1st, and we went through a recession. And the decade of the 2000s was really difficult for all of us in this community and throughout the country as manufacturing declined significantly. So I'm going to talk about a brighter day ahead in what we're now doing in manufacturing. But I was there and remember how challenging it's been for the history of Syracuse because of the great companies that were once here. But there are great companies here today, and in my opinion, there'll be great companies here. Let's get started. These are the groups that are part of the Manufacturers Alliance. MACNY now is a statewide organization. We really are the voice for manufacturing in New York State today. We work directly with political officials at the federal, state, and local level. And they run basically from Buffalo to Long Island. We're actually working on getting a partner in New York City as we speak so that we can represent, as you'll see, the largest manufacturing employment group in the state is actually employed in New York City, believe it or not. So what's the future of manufacturing? We can talk about the past, and it's enlightening and somewhat painful, but let's talk about the future, because the future is where we need to build our tomorrows. There are really 4 trends that are shaping manufacturing today, and I'm going to briefly touch on these 4 trends. The first one is the world is the market today. There was a time when the U.S. was the market, or local economy was the market, or the region was the market, but it's the entire world. They're not only your customers, they're increasingly becoming your employees, they're your suppliers, and they're your opportunity. So what's happening in manufacturing over the 10-year period from 2000 to 2011? Essentially, it's still the #1 export area for not only our country, for every country. Services grew a little bit, which is really everyone was saying that would be service growth and that would be the new export. It's still goods. We still make things to ship them and import them, and that's really the predominant amount. It's about half. And my sense is it may not change much well into the future, because we'll buy things for as long as there are things to buy. These are the top 7 industrial categories with about $9.4 trillion in 2011. And these have remained relatively constant: transportation, equipment, petrol and coal products, chemicals, computer, electronic products, machinery, electrical equipment, appliances, and components and primary metals, and all others obviously would be more. You combine everything else that gets exported, but these 7 areas have been pretty constant for quite some time. The U.S., in terms of trade, we obviously have a trade deficit, which is my contention and the reason why we thought we had net wealth loss. If If you're not making and exporting things, you're just importing things. You're missing the economic value of creating things. That's why manufacturing is so critical. It's the creation of the goods and services, which, by the way, services are now paired with those goods, that generate economic growth. And when we forget that, we lose economic growth. As a country, as a community, I think we've seen it in our own community. We've lost manufacturing technology jobs. We've lost wealth, long-term wealth. And you can see what's happened in computer and electronics. One time we were net exporters, we're net importers. You'll see in many categories we're net importers. And it kind of gives you a feel for the kinds of products that really dominate the import-export market in the U.S. New York State manufacturing goods exported is relatively flat, but is up since 2005. We saw a hit during the recession period. As you can see, we actually saw growth, and recently don't really like to see this trend, but we've moderated now in our exports for New York State. Where do we export from? We did a study. It's a little bit dated, but it's pretty much consistent. These are the top exporting metro areas. Syracuse, right here below Poughkeepsie, Newburgh, Middletown. Rochester is the #1 upstate exporting. This does not have New York City. These are upstate export. And what's really fascinating is our state is what is called the manufacturing intensive, export intensive state. That is about 35% of what we are making is being exported. So a good amount of what we make goes someplace else. That's sort of the translation. And we're only third on the list for Florida and Washington. So we depend a lot on exports as a state in order to sell our products, which is a good thing and a challenge. Where do we export to? I like to show this slide because the reality is it's changing. Over a 10-year period, the fastest growing areas of export for New York State have been to India, 14% annual growth, China, 13% annual growth, moving up the list, and then Hong Kong, which reaches the rest of Asia, or 12%. So annual growth is to Asia, India. These are obviously the biggest population centers in the world, right? And that's where our growth has been. Canada still remains our #1 export market, which makes sense. A lot of that's back and forth because they're a part of the supply chain, and some moderation in the other countries in which we, as a state, export to. So, first and foremost, the world is the market, and that changes everyone's thinking about how you make things. Second of all, technology is accelerating, and I call it a technology explosion. The amount of technology that's going on today is mind-boggling. I'll talk a little bit about what happens in this space. These are the 9 technologies that are really transforming how companies make what they make. Robots, sometimes they're called cobots. I'll be showing you a picture of one in a few moments. Simulations, vertical and horizontal integration, the Internet of Things. I'll show you a fascinating statistic coming up around that. Cybersecurity, the cloud itself, both cloud computing and cloud sharing of data. Recently I had an experience where I had to get a new phone. I was out of use of it. It wouldn't work for a night, and I thought, the world would end, right? Because I can't talk to anybody. I can't see anything. It's like, what do we do without these things? But the reality is that's where we live in today, totally connected to the cloud. Additive manufacturing, which I will show you a fascinating picture of that and how that's come a long ways. Augmented reality, and big data and analytics. These are all driving how production happens today. These emerging technologies are changing everything we know about the world as we live in. Big data, the Internet of Things I've mentioned. Robotics, along with artificial intelligence, is really changing the way we make things, as well as what we buy. Miniaturization. Sensors that are so small you can't see them, that can be used in medicine to monitor conditions. Sensors that are used on our water systems, our air systems. Biotechnology, back to miniaturization, nanomaterials, and then 3D printing or additive manufacturing, often another term for it. What's happening in the global Internet of Things is just an explosive growth. So in 2013, it was about 1.9 trillion. By 2020, it'll be 7.1 trillion, which is the size of the Russian economy. It's just an explosion of the Internet of Things. So much so that there'll be 50 billion things connected to the internet. I have 3 with me usually at all times. I have my phone, I have my watch, and I have my iPad. I have 3 devices already that are connected for just me. And I'll tell you, you go in a modern factory today, there are sensors everywhere. There are literally tens of thousands of sensors and machines working together for the outcome of the production and services. So by the end of the decade, according to Google's executive chairman Eric Schmidt, by the end of the decade, everyone on Earth will be connected. Probably a bold prediction, but coming true pretty fast. You're not connected just by one device, but multiple devices and multiple sensors. That's why big data has become a driving force in most production and even service industries as well. It's really the convergence of technologies that have some of the most exciting both production, manufacturing, and technology opportunities. So you have biotech, infotech, and nanotech all coming together, and the sweet spot right in the middle is biosensors and biochips, which I mentioned. But you also have pharmacy, diagnostic tools. You've got bioelectronics and nano devices, and hardware and software communications. All of these things are together. And great opportunities are finding new ways to use technologies that maybe weren't used in that field before. And that's where the great growth is coming in our technology and in our both manufacturing and just living environments. I love to show this one because this is a nose. This is a 3D printed nose. It's printed with the biomaterials of the person. So that the person, it's really their nose.
What do you print it on?
It's a mesh. What they do is it's a mesh, it's a holder. So this is a mesh that holds the cells that get embedded in it. So ears, this is what's going on in medicine today. You literally, you have a picture of what's, something that has
Where's my new knee there?
I think it's on our production line. It's right over here. So the future involves a lot of biomedicine and biotechnology, and that's pretty cool to think about. A little scary at times, right? But pretty cool to think about. That's the nose.
How do they stick that stuff on?
Yeah, so that's a printing. What's essentially it's a mesh it's a mesh that will live within inside the body or a part of the body, and then it's covered completely with the cells of the individual that it's taken from. So they basically using the actual cells of the individual grow cells and embed them in the mesh so that it looks, feels, and acts as close to the real thing as it's replacing. Pretty fascinating, huh? One of my favorite things. The speed of technology is the other piece that's just changed. If you're standing still, you're getting run over today. That's the problem. I mean, this will give you an example. This is a timeline of developments related to things like biochemistry and biologics. And so in the past 5 to 10 years, there are more new types, not just information, more new types of information than in the preceding 50 years. It's the acceleration, the speed in which we're learning things and sharing things that is changing the way people look at the world and they make products and the way they serve customers. It's the speed. The speed, it's not a linear, it's not an acceleration, it's a hyper acceleration. That's what's changing. It's the slope of the curve is not incremental or linear anymore. It's exponential. That's what's changing. By the way, it's harder and harder for leaders of organizations to get their heads around what will tomorrow look like, because it's going to be so radically different than it was today. Who would have guessed?
Do we have firms locally that are into this concept, into this technology world? I understand, I think all of us understand that it's around, but is it here?
Sure.
Is it in Skinny Atlas or Casanova?
Sure.
Or
It's all over. For example, we've all heard of the long-term company Welch Allyn. Welch Allyn just made a massive investment in a headquarters-like facility. They're clearly in both the medical, biological space. Tessie Plastics, which is a big supplier of plastic components to Welsh Alley, they did a massive expansion. GMA Wireless, you may have heard more recently about. If you happen to go to most sports stadiums today, and you want to use your smartphone, they do the wireless connectivity for it. And they went from about 100 people to about 800 people in the last 5 years. Yeah, we have dozens of companies. But what's interesting about they're not the GEs of yesterday. They're not thousands of people. You know, a good-sized company in our community today might be 500 or 1,500 because you're using a lot of technology, a lot of smart people. So you don't have lines of people working. You know, you have someone who does quality control, programming, make sure it runs well, and it's a multi-million-dollar machine. That's really a semiconductor, computer that's doing actual creation and assembly. So it's a different kind of business, but we have dozens of them. And the question is, can we grow them fast enough, and can we help them be successful here? Because they're going to make things someplace.
What do you do with all the people you just put out of a job, though? You went from 15,000 people down to 1,500, basically producing the same thing. What do you do with the other?
So
Where are they
great
going?
question. So, and that probably is the question that everybody asks, like, oh, this technology is coming, what happens to the people? Companies can't afford to let those people go because they don't have enough workers today. I get companies literally today that have 100 job openings. 200 jobs, can't find them. The problem today is the skill set of the individuals. They have to upgrade skills. They do not want to lose those workers because they can't find them. So there's a gap today in the skill sets. And what we have to do is close the skill gap, and there'll be plenty of jobs. It's not a job, it's not a problem. I mean, literally, they will get, someone will apply for, one of my companies, won't give you the name, they'll get 100 applications for maybe 10 job openings, and not a single one of them will be qualified. That's the challenge, it's a gap.
So that goes back to our schools and our colleges that aren't producing
Yes,
the
so
kids.
we're gonna talk more about that. I got that in my presentation, because the reality is that's the #1 question. And it's something we're working on, it's something that the community needs to be all in on, because to me, it's an education gap. That's the biggest challenge. We shouldn't be fighting technology, we could try, but the rest of the world's just gonna go around us. And so it's not, oh, well, if we don't do it, we're okay. Sorry, you lose the market, you lose the customer, you lose jobs. So doing this is inevitable. The question is, how do you do it effectively so that everybody benefits, not just a few, right? So we'll keep going, and I'll get to that because I think that's what's good. Actually, this is my thanks for the prompt. This is really hard. I don't have any cash. The world's moving from brain, it's brain's not brawn. It's all about use of our intelligence and capabilities. And this is Baxter. This is the Cobot that will work next to people today. It costs $35,000. It does not live in a cage. You can work right next to it. It will stop before it hits you. It never takes a bathroom break. It never goes on vacation.
No health insurance.
No health insurance. It will lift this part out of here. It'll measure it. It'll tell you its weight, its density. It'll tell you if it's a defective part or not. It's programmable on the spot. This is actually, it's got a face on it right now, but you program it on the spot. It can do 10, 20, 500 jobs in a day. Because you're programming it as you speak. You can see the smart worker has to stand next to this device. There might be 6 of them there. They might be manning 6 of them to make sure they're all doing their job. So you can see that, that individual who might have been lifting out of boxes and doing monotonous tasks that they can only do, partially well, and now managing the process, and programming the process, quality control, making sure it all happens. But this is built in the United States, by the way. Baxter's built in the United States. It come out of an MIT project, and they can't make enough of them fast enough. So what's happening is, this is the right question you just asked her, where have all the jobs gone? Because our production, U.S. production, has never been higher. We make more products than we've ever made. But the jobs are flat to declining. And that's the fundamental question we have to answer, I think, is how do we make sure people have good jobs? Because these are great jobs for them. And we'll talk more about that. What's really happened is a transformation in the workforce. In 1956, 60% of the workers were unskilled. And 20% were skilled, and we had 20% professionals. But by 2005, tables have flipped. Only about 5% were unskilled, 20% professionals. We don't need, quite frankly, in the job market, a lot more professionals, just to be brutally honest. About the same as we did 50 years ago. What we need is skilled workers, a lot of them. And that's the challenge with our education system today, and we're gonna talk more about it. Because what we need is skilled workers. We need people with 2-year technical degrees to start their careers. Right? We need people with advanced skills coming out of high school. You know, we need to do those things today. And it's fundamentally opposed to what the message we sent to me when I was going to school. Go to college, get a job, and we just thought, well, maybe. You know, there's a lot of young people that are living at home right now. What's the #1 reason to be in New York State? Skilled workforce. We asked our members. You know, the reality is it's the #1 reason why someone stays and expands their business here, because they can find skilled workforce. And if we do that well, we win the global competition. I'll come back to that. How difficult is it to find good workers with the right skill sets? Pretty hard. Somewhat difficult to very difficult, well over half. And there's an average level of difficulty, 31. Only 16% said, not too difficult. 84% think it's hard to find quality, high-skilled workers. That's a real problem. That's a real problem for growth. You have to decide if you're going to grow your company in central New York, or you're going to grow it in another country or another state, and you can find workforce there, that's where you'll be.
So this is New York State only?
This is New York State. This is from New York State employers. By the way, this is the problem. The challenge is for the rest of the world and the country is it's about the same everywhere. Everyone's having a hard time finding skilled workers. Everybody. Yeah.
What about the transference of work from here to Asia, where they claim they have more skilled workers? Like
Well,
the
well,
Philippines,
they-
India, Indonesia.
Yeah, so that's the claim.
I realize
it's
it-
not true. They have a lot of unskilled workers. That's the reality. And they're having the same problems when it comes to skilled workers as we are. You'll find U.S. companies and international companies that are leaving China or other places because they can't get enough skilled workers. You can have lots, you can line them up out the door for unskilled. But finding skilled workers is the hard part. So they have the same challenge, they have more numbers.
Right.
And they're working hard at it though. And we gotta work hard at it too. 'Cause that's, the winning game here is skilled. You gotta be skilled at all levels. Good question though, because that's what the claim is. I mean, you know, I'm gonna talk a little bit more about why companies are doing what they're doing today, but it used to be a cost question. You know, the accountants would tell you, you could save a boatload of money,
Right.
you know, if you were in Asia. Just look at the payroll difference, right? They're not saying that. Please.
What type of skills are you looking for?
So we
Evidently, you're
can,
not looking for liberal arts.
those skills are useful, but they're not the most critical skills. But working well on a team, all the things that come, you know, working well with others is all a team sport today, generally speaking. So there are liberal arts capacities that are absolutely critical to well-functioning teams and great employees. But yeah, we're talking about electrical, mechanical skills. We're talking about bioengineering skills, all the kinds of things. And really, it's a middle skills. It's not PhD level, or not even master's. It's out of high school, advanced, almost certification-like certification. You get through certification. You don't have to actually have formal college education to do some of these things. So yeah, it's a wide variety of them, skill-wise, but they're all, I would call them middle skills, not that PhD level advanced skills. So we talked, so National Association of Manufacturers, along with Deloitte, did a study. How important is manufacturing to our economy? 81% of 18 to 24-year-olds said it was, and that's about 90% overall. Unfortunately, manufacturing careers are both interesting and rewarding. Only 53% of 18 to 24-year-olds said it was. But the general population was much better. Only 61% said it. Well, that's driving down the opportunity because people think those aren't good jobs, really don't exist. And so why would I go train for them or learn from them? Why would I care about them? So this is we have a gap. They think it's really important, right? But they don't want those jobs. That's a problem. That's a huge problem.
What's the pay scale for that level of?
It's the highest paying job in this community, manufacturing jobs, over $50,000. You can have these jobs with benefits, that's just pay, with benefits, with certification or 2 years worth of experience, no college debt. And that's the starting place. You know, mid-40s to 50s is sort of starting. You know, we got technicians that make 90, 100. I mean, the reality, you can make fantastic money if you have the right skill set in manufacturing technology today.
You're going to talk about apprenticeships?
Yes, I'm going to. It's one of our newest initiatives at MACNY, and we think it's a home run. Important to our national security, people see it that way. This is a problem too. Manufacturing can effectively compete globally. And that may have been the case 10 years ago, not today. We've got to change people's perception. You can make it in the United States and make it better than any place in the world, and cheaper, I'll get to that, than any place in the world today. Okay, economically, we have to start talking about clusters. Clusters of businesses, groups of businesses that are in the same place in space. That's the hottest and most important concept in economic development today. Having one big company in your community, that's not how economic development is done. You want clusters of companies, medium to small, as well as some large, but it's not the big, large companies anymore that usually drive the economics of regions anymore. So what's a cluster? I've defined it for you. It's a concentration of interconnected businesses, both the suppliers, service providers, and associated institutions like MACNY that really serve a particular sector or subsector. This is kind of what's involved in all those components. And the key is you need some global technology and market leaders that can drive the entire cluster opportunity. Why did 200 plus communities try to get Amazon's headquarters, right? Well, because if you got Amazon, you get all those other companies too. Google shows up, right? And so does Microsoft, and that's what's happening in Seattle. You know, all these companies start to cluster together. Why do they cluster together? Workforce. Who wants to move to your community if they lose their job in one company and can't go to another company? So it's interesting. You think, oh, it's the climate. Not the climate. Oh, they got great transportation systems. Yeah, they might have that too. It's people. You got the best people, the most educated, most caring, capable people. I think you win in the 21st century. And that's funny because all we can talk about is technology. But technology, you can get anywhere. You can be in India and buy that technology. Anywhere in the world, you can buy that technology.
What are the chances of getting Amazon?
You know, yeah, so what's interesting about that proposal, which is I'm glad we did. I mean, if you don't shoot for the stars, you never get there, right? Put in a proposal. Reality is, I don't know what we do. I don't know how we get 50,000 workers for one company in our community. But wouldn't it be great if we had an Amazon, some component of Amazon here, and had 1,000 jobs or 1,500 jobs? And I think we have a great shot back, and I'll talk more about that, but because of the unmanned air systems, which we're a leader in it, we could get Amazon to come to our community, but maybe not the headquarters. And I'm not so sure you want the headquarters, by the way. Headquarters aren't always the best things to have in communities, but I'm saying that to you as my own personal opinion, that I would love to have the headquarters. If we got the headquarters, we'd all celebrate, right? Because it'd be a huge opportunity, but it comes with, it's the challenges too.
Well, I shouldn't probably say this, but my son-in-law, who works for Amazon, said, "Be careful what you wish for."
Yeah,
Because the cost of living in Seattle is 3 times Syracuse.
Goes up.
And he said, our company comes there, we pay workers all this money, your cost of homes, everything.
Yeah, it has an impact. So the reality is, I think you have to be making applications for these opportunities, in part because the applications themselves show that you're interested for other companies, right? We care about growth. That's the message I think we send. And I would, I'm with the rest of the community. I'd love to win if we could win, but I think it's a good exercise whether you win or not.
Good.
No, right?
Yeah, I hope we get them.
I hope we get it. If we don't get it, we'll get some other companies. Or we'll get existing companies to realize what a great place it is to work. And they'll grow here. To me, the best economic strategies are growth. Existing companies that add jobs, invest capital.
So trickle down.
Yeah, and all the service providers and the pizza shops and everybody else around. Like GlobalFoundries, a huge New York State investment. There's 3,500 workers at GlobalFoundries, but the ecosystem has 15,000. So that's why these clusters matter, because if you get a couple global leaders in here at 500, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, you get the multiplier 5 to 10 to 1. Yeah, Person up front, please.
Will there be a place in the future, not everybody coming out of high school is an Einstein,
Nope.
and you have a big segment of unskilled workers. Will there be a place in modern technology for these people to obtain employment?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's something communities have to work on. I don't think it just happens. But I do. I think the reality is that, you know, there are a lot of service workers, beyond just retail, service workers that do fantastic service in our communities. And so I think there's a place, I truly believe there's a place for everybody. Not everyone's gonna work in the high-tech job where they have to have these skill sets. But they are the multiplier. So that is, if you get those kinds of jobs, then all those other services and work happens. That's really the beginning. I mean, what happened when Carrier moved its facility and grew here? All the associated jobs is what community benefited from.
What's to keep these same companies from going to Asia, going to Mexico, going someplace else? With our technology, we don't get the jobs, but here now we gotta import the products that we designed, whatever.
Sure, the companies that are the companies themselves are really critical to be looking at, obviously. But as I just mentioned, what they used to do is move to other places for lower costs. And now that's not necessarily the case because it's primarily about skilled workers. And it's one thing that doesn't pick up and move with you very easily. And you can move equipment, you can buy the technology someplace else, but people like where they're at. It's hard to move your workforce, really hard, especially critical skilled labor. And besides, if you have an ecosystem where they can work someplace else in the community, you know, why should I move? I'll walk down the street. My kids are in school here. I got my parents. And my point is that it's a lot harder if you have clustered ecosystems to just pick up and move. You can do that. You can build another facility anywhere in the world you want to. But those workers probably go stay there.
Well, I know the president says he's trying to get manufacturers to come back in the United States, which is great. I don't know if it's gonna happen or not.
I
but
think it's
I
going to be.
hope it does.
I do too. I think there's both. You need companies to invest. I'll talk about that here. And you also need existing companies to grow. We often forget about existing company growth. It gets under discussed. You know, if someone has a 10 job, it doesn't make, the media gets 10 jobs. Well, if you do 10 jobs over 10 years, that's 100, and you would be a big announcement, 100-person company came to town. But it just gets underreported and under discussed. This is how important clusters are in the United States. These are all federally funded, supported cluster spaces in the country. This is what the United States is investing in. Technology centers. We have a center of excellence here on indoor air quality, and indoor systems in our own community. But you can see, by the way, it's highly clustered, isn't it? In the Northeast. Not as many over here on the West Coast. Kind of fascinating to watch. It grows all the time. But the reality is, this is what the United States, as our government, is investing in, along with companies. These are all private-public partnerships, not just the government putting money in, but companies that also invest in a leverage, usually leverage 2 to 10 to 1. So what's going on when you look at the competitiveness of countries? Over here on your left is 2010. This is a global CEO survey of the best place to make your products. China #1, US #4. Okay? Germany, by the way, all the way down here, 8. By 2013, we move up to 3. By 2016, we're #2. By 2020, we'll be the best place in the world to make products. Best place. 10 years ago, when I took the job, we weren't saying that. We went further back, the U.S. would be further and further down this list, right? So I'm going to tell you what's changed, why that happened, what really happened that changed people's perception. These are CEOs of global companies, which means they get picked a lot. They can decide where they want to go. So why the U.S.? Well, in a 10-year period, this is China over here in the U.S. If the U.S. cost competitiveness is 100, 10 years ago, you got a 14% benefit by being in China. Just rough. And these are, by the way, these are all the other countries that make things. Germany, by the way, is a powerhouse manufacturer, and their costs are significantly higher to make things in Germany than they are in the US. But they figured it out. They have some lessons we could learn. They have a huge export economy, Germany does. But when it comes to cost, which used to drive a lot of US manufacturers, in my opinion, decisions, you could see it cost beneficial. You could look at the balance sheet, look at your expenses and revenue, see if I move to China or Asia, I save money, which more profits, more investment. Well, over a 10-year period, it went to 4%. You don't move your facility probably for 4%. Especially since, what I just showed you, the dynamics are turning the other direction. The trends are in our favor. So what drove that? Interesting enough, labor, the US is over here, China's over here. Labor was a smaller percentage than you might imagine by 2015. When you factor in productivity, 79% of the 100% of a cost is labor, 74 in China. I mean, it's just not significant anymore. So you don't go there for labor. Interesting enough, electricity, natural gas, and other, resources are important, natural gas and electricity, and that's where the big change happened in the last 10 years. Natural gas.
Fracking.
Natural gas changed the whole equation for making things in our country. We became a place where energy was abundant and low cost, and who would have guessed we are a net exporter of energy. How much so? Germany, France, Italy, UK, Japan, dramatically higher cost for energy, dramatically higher. It's a window, of course. Natural gas won't be the primary use for a long period of time, but it is a window to make progress, right? As we make a transition to a more sustainable economy, which is necessary and inevitable, but it is what it is. So, when you talk to those CEOs, what drives their decisions? The US does really well in talent. Germany, by the way, is doing just great when it comes to talent. They have, by the way, a great apprenticeship system, and they literally, have technicians, and they do all that really well, starting in high school and below, which we need to learn from. Innovation policy, we do incredibly well. Energy policy, very high. Physical infrastructure, we have a much better physical infrastructure. You can see how China does very poorly on things like energy policy, physical infrastructure. Their legal environment is, non-existent. That's a real problem. If you're doing high-tech things, do you want someone to take it? You don't. You want to protect it. And that's why, developed countries and developed legal systems matter a lot to companies. So, why are companies coming back to the United States, or more importantly, growing here? Or why are foreign companies investing in the U.S.? The talent availability, we have a high level of productivity, we have great quality control, people want things to work, and they want it done right the first time. Shorter supply lines. The U.S. still is the largest consumer market in the world. You want to be close to your consumers, you want supplies that are quick. Amazon doesn't want to wait 3 weeks for it to get on a boat and come over here, or anybody doesn't, for that matter. They want to, in fact, they want to fly it with a drone to your house now. Now they want to bring it in the house. I just want to talk about that too. Yeah, right. Protecting your IP, energy cost, competitiveness, and availability. You got to have energy. It's got to be available. Really important.
Now, you brought up natural gas, and that's one of our reasons why we're in the situation we are now.
Yep.
But that's not renewable. So is technology getting ahead of the game a little bit for us, so that
I think so.
we got renewable energy, so we're still top of the line as far as drawing their manufacturing?
Yeah, I think
and
so.
whatever?
I think the reality is we're in a rush globally to be more sustainable, to have energy sources that are not dependent on fossil fuels. I will tell you in the U.S. that the actual use, both the carbon footprint and the use of energy is declining at the industry level. They're always finding ways to do it more efficiently, more effectively. So the trends are all in the right direction. To be brutally honest, the places that are struggling with how to do renewables and control their environments are countries overseas, Asia and China, they're having huge environmental problems. You're reading about it. The air is horrible, you know? They're building coal plants as fast as they can in China. Coal plants. That's the reality. So we're one of the most environmentally conscious countries in the world, along with Europe is right there with us, sometimes ahead of us. But the developed world does, I think, understand, and my members understand. The future is, is in heading in the direction of both sustainable, renewable, for both the planet and for their business.
I mean, you and I are going to see it, but somewhere in 100 years or 200 years from now, we could be out of natural gas.
Yeah.
So you gotta stay ahead of the
You
game.
gotta stay in the game. Yeah, no, that's why we have entire industries in that space. Who would have guessed that an electric car company called Tesla would be the highest market value car company?
Yeah.
5 years.
Mm.
The technology is a winning game for these kinds of problems. Because the technology we're gonna need hasn't yet been invented, but probably will shortly or soon. Battery technologies coming into line much more quickly. Sustainable grids are all on the drawing board today. These things are, someone today is dreaming of them, and not just dreaming of them, they're making them. Yeah.
One of the interesting realities of, you used the term reality a moment ago. This is an incredibly interesting presentation you're making. Basically with all kinds of factual reality. But one of our problems as a society is that, at least on the national political scene, there is, much of this would be labeled fake news, and you know what I mean.
I know.
But so, what is the position of you and your organization and those you represent with respect to the efforts to quash free trade throughout the world, to bring back tariffs and to get rid of trade agreements like NAFTA, and we already got out of the Pacific trade.
Yeah,
Because we export all these things.
So the reality is that, in my opinion, free trade is a myth. There's no such thing as free trade. In an ideal world, you have free trade. So there are trade agreements, and they're either honored or not, and it's about having really good relationships for trade. So I do think some of our trade agreements have to be looked at, and they have to be enforced. We don't even enforce the ones we have. So if we're going to be in a global market, we ought to play by the same rules, right? And it ought to be fair. So you'll hear our organization talk about fair trade, not tariffs or control. Because by the way, if your market is everywhere else but here in the future, you got to be able to get into those markets. You got to be able to sell those markets. And by the way, you shouldn't have to give up your intellectual property to be in those markets, which by the way is oftentimes the rules of the game. Countries engage in these conversations, not companies, and that's what companies now realize. Who wants to win the game? We all want to export, and we want it to be fair. I don't have the answers to the politics. If I did, they'd pay me a lot more.
You'd be sitting in the White House.
It's brutal. The politics are brutal. I studied at West Point. It's combat. It's war. And I've served with people. I fortunate enough never actually was in combat. I'll say fortunate enough because it's war as hell. My brother served, and it changes your life. The reality is it shouldn't be like that when it comes to our politics. We ought to be collaborative and cooperative. We ought to figure it out, right? So at my level, I deal with the private sector, and I advocate on their behalf. And I just want to, what they say is, give me a level playing field. I just want to compete. I don't need to win because you set the rules in my favor. But I don't want to start in a 100-yard dash when they start at the 50-yard line and I start at 0. So don't make me run twice as fast. Let's try to catch up. So I don't have the answers specific to the trade agreements. I know that generally speaking, they lag reality. They need enforcement mechanisms. For example, in the metal industry, there's a lot of dumping going on. So they're wiping out entire metal industries. And our companies, they're standalone companies. They're not countries. They're not subsidized. I mean, the metal industries in China are state-owned businesses. So the reality is it's a complicated question. I don't have the answers, but I will tell you our members want a fair playing field to compete, and they want to sell to anybody in the world. By the way, we just got to get a lot better at it. We have to get really good at it. We got a little, let's be honest, it's easier when the market is next door. When the market's in India and China, you gotta sell it differently. But it's a challenge, and I don't have any good answers for you. All that you said, I wouldn't disagree with. I wouldn't. But I think that the problem is we get caught in this rhetoric of protectionism or free trade. You know, extremes. They're extremes, and yet most of the world lives in here. You know, I have to sell my textile product in India. How do I do that? You know, I just want to sell it, and I'm okay if I'm selling it here. I mean, my members live in the free market economy. They think it works. They want a market system. They don't want a control system where they lose or someone else wins, and that's the challenge. So I have members on both sides of the spectrum, by the way. People that believe in this space and this space, and I try to reconcile it as best I can. And what we try to do is tackle specific things. We do most of our work at the state level, to be brutally honest, because that's where we can have impact. At the federal level, we participate with some groups. We work with the National Association of Manufacturers, with some other trade groups. But it's a great question. I don't have a good answer for how to fix it. But it's complicated, I'll tell you that. I know. It's complicated. I would say it's very complicated. Why bring it back to the U.S.? Quick turnarounds, prototypes, innovation. Customers have really come to expect these short time delivery windows, which means what? That's why you want to be close to your customers today. Greener products, the public, especially the next generation, really do want a lot greener, more sustainable products. And then, as we mentioned, society demands. The millennials are pushing the market in a direction that buy local, make it local. Maybe I can make it at home in my 3D printer. These are the things that are changing the market. It's the consumers that change our markets. And that's the beauty of the private sector, by the way. You don't get to create your own reality in the private sector. You know, you don't get to make up a story and hope it works. You know, if your competitor does it better than you and they sell your product, you're out of business. So, it's kind of nice working with individuals who focus on what's real for me and how do I make a good product tomorrow? How do I keep my workers here? And you know, there's a earthiness. I come from a farming background. My grandfather was a farmer. To this, they gotta make something today. It's gotta be a value. Someone's gotta want to buy it.
You
It grounds you.
supply first or demand first?
What's that?
When you create a product, you look at the potential demand and then you create the product?
It's a little bit of both.
You create the product and hope they'll be.
Well, today's the consumer often is integral to the actual creation of the product and the changing of the product. You know, because of the big data in the supply cycle today, your customer can tell you how to make it, design it, and in the future, you'll do it one-off. I mean, I visited a factory in Germany, the BMW factory. Every single car is unique. Every single car. You can have any color you want. Some woman walked in with her nail polish and said, I want this color on my car, and they gave it to her. It's amazing. It's a custom design per car. And the factory is amazing. They literally, the workers walk on wood, and they literally have wood floors that they walk on. They shift jobs. I mean, there's lots of employees there. I think there was like 10,000. And they were making every day, you know, thousands of cars one-off. I mean, 12,000 seat choices.
We've done just the opposite. From
Well-
20 years, 50 years ago, you had a choice. Now you get about 3 colors or 5 colors, whatever.
Yeah, so I think the consumer market's going more and more to, I want what I want, and I'll pay a premium for it. I mean, BMWs aren't cheap. But the reality is, people are willing to pay for customized products, and those factories use that big data to put it all together and coordinate that so that you can put out a product. And I don't own one. I happen to go on the tour, and the person who went on the tour with me was, you know, that was their third. You know, so people love that, and I can see why. I was fascinated by it. I mean, as somebody who works for manufacturers, never seen nothing like it in my life. A car individualized. Yeah.
Can you explain how big data is being used?
I'll try.
Yeah.
I'm not probably smart enough to fully understand it, but
Yeah.
What they're able to do through that process is obviously create a system where you can make endless choices, and they can integrate that into your vehicle as it travels on the line. And the reality is that is a smart vehicle in the beginning. It's literally communicating with the workers. I mean, this is all the sensors come in. So it's all done, they're all highly automated. I watched the painting operation, for example. By the way, it's ironic, but 30% of the cars are still black. Any color you want, I'll take black.
Oh my
So,
God.
so it's just kind of funny when you have all these choices, at some point you say, just give me what you got. I had one guy, he was given the tour, he said he bought one, and he had to buy one. It was one of the lower cost versions. And he said he went in and he came out 2 hours later and said, I just picked the seat. I had 12,000 choices. Mind-boggling, all the different stitches that you can get, different colors. But it's all automated, and it's all big data. A person could never do that. So it's machines working with individuals, working with more machines talking to more machines. It's this whole ecosystem of big data. So it's fascinating, a little daunting, and that's where artificial intelligence happens. These decisions are being made with algorithms. That's why math is so important. So what the challenges that we face, though, the global competition is both an opportunity and a challenge. Anybody can start a company anywhere in the world, and if they're better at it than you, they win. That's the car companies are finding out. Who knows who the car company of the future is going to be? Is it going to be Google? Who knows? I mean, you can maybe never have been in the business. Lyft. Who knew that the car business would be transformed by Uber and Lyft? Companies that didn't exist 10 years ago. So that's the speed of change. If you can have a good idea, you can make it happen, you can win this competition anywhere in the world, to include the US. But it's a whole different ballgame. You don't have to be in business for 30 years, 20 years, 50 years, own the technology, own the production. You can buy all that. Tesla bought it. Unfair trade practices. Again, the focus I have is unfair. We need trade practices, we need to know the rules of the game, we need to have good trade agreements, we need to enforce them. Let's have good trade agreements and let's enforce them. By the way, unilateral trade agreements are hard, right? It's hard to keep everybody when one person's violating them. Sometimes bilateral trade agreements, I think, work better. Because then you can look eye to eye and say, listen, we know you're cheating this particular industry. How do we fix this? So I think we have to come to some grips with the unfair part of this. But we want trade. No border.
Who does that, Randy?
Who does what?
Who monitors that? State Department?
Yeah, well, it's about 4 different agencies in the federal government that manages that. And by the way, it's understaffed. We don't spend enough time, effort, and in my mind, resources on it. If trade is so important, why do we spend so little time and effort on it? It's like so many things we should spend more time and effort on. But yeah, it's those things are with government complicated. Increases in the burden of cost, taxes, regulation can actually challenge us. The speed of change in technology, I think, is the most daunting for most executives and leaders. Like, what's the future look like? Well, I never saw that coming. Shift in growth markets, really developing world is tremendously, well, growth is in the developing world in terms of middle-class consumers buying products and obviously needing stable political systems. And then I think the biggest one is the growing skills gap and difficulty in finding talent, which I think is generally going to be a local solution. It's kind of nice. We can work on it. We don't have to worry about what Washington's talking about in some ways. We can just do it. Work on it.
But isn't there a cost concern when it comes to training and the time frame that's involved to get Joe Smith to be able to perform to X10 plus level? And who pays for that? The companies, the feds, the state?
All the above. I think all the above. The reality is we need great systems and processes. I'll call them processes. That's what we talk about and my members talk about. Starting birth. There's a community effort right now. I was just in a meeting this morning called the Early Childhood Alliance. We need young children to be ready for school when they show up. Because if they start behind, they almost never catch up. And we have some kids starting in kindergarten who are 2 or 3 grades behind, or 2 or 3 years behind, I should say. So it's the whole system. It's the entire community. It's the education system. It's government's intervention in obviously working. It's businesses who need the talent when it comes out the other end of the pipeline. It's all of us. I really think it's all of us. Direct foreign investment in the U.S., huge opportunity. Increased cost competitiveness of U.S. manufacturing, use of technology. These are all opportunities for us. Most of the opportunity in manufacturing is small. This is the number of firms in the U.S. There are 3,524 firms over 500. There are 107,000 between 0 and 4. I think the sweet spot is right in here, 20 to 500. They're the most nimble, most creative, they grow the fastest, they have the greatest opportunity. This is where our community ought to spend a lot of time. This is where all the growth is up. And by the way, you hear this all the time, small business, that's where the jobs are, small business. That's what it is. Large companies are usually not in a growth mode, employee-wise. Where did the growth happen after the Great Recession till 2013? Surprisingly enough, places like Wisconsin and Michigan and Minnesota and North Dakota and Colorado, not just Florida or California. So it doesn't just have to happen in places, or Texas. Texas did grow, but its growth rate was less than actually Michigan or Wisconsin. So it doesn't have to be in those traditional places that we think manufacturing needs to grow. What are manufacturers saying today? This is from the most recent survey done by the National Association of Manufacturers. Almost 90% saw a positive outlook for their companies. Huge number. They're seeing growth. They're expecting growth in production, capital investments. They're expecting growth of 2.2% in full-time employment. Employee wages up 2.2%. The only negative spot on this whole chart is they're also expecting health insurance costs to go up 8.3%. I think that's way too low from what I'm hearing. So that's unfortunate. What do they see as their primary concerns? Rising healthcare costs and insurance, number one. Number two, though, just barely attracting and retaining a quality workforce. Almost 72%. By the way, finding capital for investment, 6%. Plenty of money to be had to make investments.
The one factor that's not on your chart that seems to be an increasingly negative factor is the drug crisis.
Oh, yeah. No, right. It's, in reality, and that does affect the quality of the workforce available. Let's be honest, when young people are in some way addicted or suffering from this, and or all people for that matter.
Don't have any statistics on it yet, though.
I don't. Probably somebody out there starting to figure it out, talking about that being a problem. Yeah, it is a problem. It's a big public
Huge.
policy and public concern. We are still the #1 place to invest dollars, foreign direct dollars. Companies long to invest and be in the United States. Some of our best companies in this community, Sob Census, Infocon, a lot of companies that want to be here investing. Marquardt, they do the automotive market.
Well, aren't they to some extent stuck here?
What do you mean by that?
Well, they own property, they got a workforce.
Well, yeah, so
Their families
actually,
are
that's a
attached.
great observation, because that's one of the reasons why manufacturing is great. It's really hard to move that facility they spent all that money on. So, but they wouldn't double down on it. Like Marquardt just made their Casanova headquarters the global, technology center. So you wouldn't double down. You just kind of run out your investments. See, the way you know a manufacturer's staying or not, do they keep making investments? You see millions of dollars going still into that facility. Because if you don't, you just run the investment out, right? You say, I've made my 10 million investment, pick a number, and I'm just going to play it out. But when they're making new investments, that's a huge sign that they find it valuable to be here. By the way, those are everyone I've mentioned is a high-tech company. Anyway, so we're the #1 by far, still the best place to make your investment in the world. And that's a good thing for us, long-term, because those are jobs. So this is kind of a snapshot of the workforce and the production in the state of New York. These give you different products dominate each one of the regions. This is Central New York right here, a little bit smaller than the southern tier. Long Island and New York City, huge influence on manufacturing. Aerospace a lot in Long Island. highly specialized apparel production in New York City. Fashion industry still does a lot of production. They're all small though. Finger Lakes in Western New York are huge places for making things. It kind of gives you a snapshot of where things are made and a little bit of what kind of products dominate those markets. Outlook in New York State, this is done by the Fed of New York State manufacturers. Outlook's very positive, some of the more positive views since 2014, much like reflecting also the national outlook, positive since 2014, all in the upswing. Our output continues to grow in billions of dollars. We make more than ever, and we just keep making more. That's good. And this is what we do, the top 10 New York manufacturing sectors, chemical products, food and beverage. I think food and beverage could be a home run. It meets all the needs for current needs and future needs. People want to know where their products are made, they're taken care of and that they're safe. They want short supply lines. We want to buy apples from New York. No, let's be honest. That's what we really want to do. When I go to the store and I see an apple from Fuji, a Fuji apple from Australia, I think to myself, really? I don't need an apple. Australia. Maybe I want a consumer product or something. I don't need an apple. So food and beverage, I think, is a huge opportunity for us, and we can do it really well. We own at least we started through Chobani, the Greek yogurt market, and that whole food and beverage on the dairy side is a huge opportunity. But computer electronics, machinery, fabricated metals, still really important. Plastics, huge opportunity for us. Even printed materials, believe it or not, are coming back and used in a variety of ways. This shows the real change in what happened in manufacturing over the decade of 2000. It was really, China became a very important part and joined the WTO, World Trade Organization. China really emerged in that decade. And Asia really emerged in that decade as a manufacturing powerhouse. And we lost a lot of workers and a lot of opportunity. The US as a whole lost a third. 1/3 of those jobs went away. And ours, almost 40%. Took a huge hit. It was a large loss. We saw the impact in our communities. So. In the Syracuse area, over that decade, we went from 44,000 to 27,000. Just to give you, that's the pain we all felt and the pain we all heard about. Right? So the job trends in Central New York, some good news here. I'd like to end on better news. Manufacturing still makes 8% of the jobs, which by the way is about national average. So part of our perspective in manufacturing is that at one time we had 30, 40, 50% of the jobs in manufacturing. We had a lot of jobs in manufacturing. But now we're more like the rest of the country, which kind of, in some ways makes sense, more like the rest of the world. It's a global market. We don't get to have, islands of prosperity where we have 50% of all the manufacturing jobs in our community. We'd like to do it. It ain't gonna happen. And this is, we actually have a pretty balanced economy. Not a bad profile as long as the vectors are moving up. That's what I think we need to do, is move the vectors in the right direction. To be honest, you don't want to be overly dependent on any one sector. That's not sustainable, and it doesn't ride through downturns very well. Right? You'd rather be balanced and sustainable. That's my view of what your economy wants to look like. You don't want huge highs, and you don't want huge, really bad lows. You want to do this, right?
You reduce some of my financial
I'll let somebody else answer that question. So, job growth, manufacturing, we actually have had positive job growth of about 300 jobs over the course of last year. That's good. And you'll see the other job growth on the far right here, professional business services, leisure and hospitality is a growth industry in our community. Government's still growing, primarily at the local level. In some losses in some other spaces. Health and education, it's all losses, for instance. Average weekly wage, manufacturing's the best paying average weekly wage, followed by financial. And that's why you want to grow those sectors that pay the best, because it's all, people spend that money locally. they buy houses and cars and groceries. These are the companies that is identified by the Department of Labor that are growing, and I highlighted in red the manufacturers or technology. A lot of them on it. Some of you maybe didn't know, G.A. Braun, one of the world-class makers in industrial wash machines. Hospitals, cruise ships, they make them right here. One of the best in the world at making.
It used to be over on Erie Boulevard, and I forget the name of it. They were selling it all over the world.
They're still, and they've moved they have a new location, but they're growing.
Prosperity was the name of the company originally.
So you got some companies you may have heard of, Fischer Scroll, a German company, air refrigeration. Legrand fruit processing company. We obviously know Lockheed Martin, Hillrom, which is the large corporation, Hillrom as well. Allen, JMA Wireless, I mentioned, JDAC Technology, barcoding scanner manufacturer, Light for Life candles, candle manufacturer, believe it or not, candles are still manufactured. Just a few of them. Some more. Northeast Electronics, Power Cables, Specialized Packaging Corporation, paper printed plant, SRC. They're really making some significant through Griffon, their subsidiary in the unmanned airspace.
I think you must tell them SRC is the short name for Syracuse Research.
Yeah, Syracuse Research Corp. They have two companies, SRC and SRC Tech. You know, they actually make a fantastic product for our armed forces, radar systems that protect the actual service person who's in the field.
Armed forces, you didn't anywhere in your presentation say anything military. You're just, basically it's all folded in with technology and manufacturing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Lockheed Martin on the last slide, they're obviously huge into the defense space. They're all being driven by technology. Interesting enough, if you're in the consumer market, your technology is moving much faster because it has, if you're in the defense industry, it's got to be proven. The reality is you can't afford something to go wrong. So consumer products will sometimes drive that. So actually, a lot of the defense companies want to be in the consumer product field too, because they want to grow in all those spaces.
Your slide showed chemical products as being the largest class of things made in New York City. What chemical products do you make?
So you have large companies like Bausch & Lomb, for example, all the eye solutions and photonics and all of those industries in the Rochester area they have a lot of chemical related products. Probably some of the products made by Bristol Myers Squibb would fall in that category, though they're biomedical today. So yeah, there's a lot of chemically related products that have to do with the chemistry side versus a physical metal product. It's a lot. You have an antibiotic maker, Estera Pharma is growing. Yeah.
I have a question. You're talking about the tax situation in New York State is very unfavorable towards businesses. Could you touch on that a tad?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, so for manufacturers, if you're a C corporation, publicly traded corporation, you have a 0% state tax.
Well,
So that's the problem. There's so few of them. If you're an S corp, privately owned business, you don't have a tax. We're working on that now. We think there needs to be a tax cut for manufacturers, for instance, because they can be anywhere in the world. So you ought to have lower tax rates on technology companies. So the challenge with the tax rate is we know we're a high tax state, and we got to do something about it because it's a competitive disadvantage. And what I tell public policy makers is you got to move the vector in the right direction. You can't keep going up. It's got to move it's got to flatten out or go down. Because people look at trends. What will it be in 10 years from now? Well, if the vector looks like this, I'm starting here in an already high-tech state, they're going to be up here. So we've seen moderation. It starts with constrained government spending, which at the state level is 2% annually. That's much better, 5 times better, three times better than we've had in past years, so that's good. But we do have to deal with the tax situation. It has to be, we have to deal with it at the personal level too. We have lots of people who are leaving the state to go when they retire and they take all those dollars with them. So I think the reality is we do have to do something about the tax climate. I think everybody's doing some of that work. I think we need to continue to do more. But yeah, It's gotta be competitive. The US is going, looking at its tax code for the same reason. The corporate tax rate in some countries is half of what they pay in the US. That's not sustainable. You can't, we used to do things the way we wanted to do it because we were the biggest country and the most prosperous country in the world right after World War II. Why? Because everybody else's country was destroyed because of the war. We could just go make stuff. Well, those days are over. You gotta be competitive. It's a global economy, back to the global economy. You're right, we need to do more in that space. I've seen some progress. We have some proposals as an organization, but we need to do more.
Well, I think, what about the VAT taxes that are all over Europe?
Yeah, quite frankly, if I could have a brand new tax system, we'd have a value-added tax in this country. Because quite frankly, the rest of the world.
That's where they're making up their taxes.
Oh, yeah. The reality is, we ought to do what they're doing. Why do we tax income like we do? Why do we tax property like we do? They have a value-added tax, which actually incentivizes production and export.
Right.
Companies like Germany and China, there are like 5 countries in the whole world that don't have value-added tax. Us and the other ones don't export almost anything. Like, why do we sit there and think we can be this unique country that does taxation so radically different? And that's how you get a competitive advantage. You have a value-added tax that changes the dynamics, so now our products are more expensive. So if I had to rewrite the tax code, no one's asked me to write it. Value-added tax, we'd have it tomorrow. Because it would really force us as a country and give us an advantage to make things again. So, yeah.
What about the reuse of old buildings?
Oh, and I think there's some really good brownfield credits I think are necessary in New York State. They've helped convert buildings. Typically, they go from industrial to commercial use, so, these are fantastic buildings, So the reality is we need to do that right because it's environmentally sound, and why not use those spaces? These are 5 growth sectors. I would add unmanned air to this, by the way. Biosciences, digital electronic devices, environmental systems, packaging, precision metalworking are all clustered growth areas for us where we have competitive advantages. Unmanned air, I think, is quickly becoming a growth cluster for us. A unique advantage to have unmanned air. But this comes from a study done about our region where we show we have a higher concentration in environmentally grow much faster in those spaces. How do they succeed as a manufacturer today? Focus on talent, embrace those advanced technologies, leverage the strength of partnerships to get outside of the spaces and places that you now make and sell things. You have to have a balanced approach to having a global enterprise. You shouldn't probably be overly committed to any one country if you're a global producer. You may want to be in China to sell to the China market. Of course, that makes sense. But do you want all your production in one place in space? I wouldn't want to bet my company on the fact that that country will treat me nice or respect me. I would want to be balanced. And we really need a smart strategic public partnerships. Work well with local officials and state officials. It's harder and harder today as the rhetoric gets ratcheted up.
Mm-hmm.
But, businesses do need to work well with the public sector. But what are we doing? We focus on helping individuals be successful. We run about 300 event days a year. It's down to 17. We call ourselves sometimes Event Art Us. And we run successful events for individuals to learn. We do training, both on-site, open enrollment. We're helping people use digital learning tools. So we help individuals be successful. We have really becoming a nationally recognized apprenticeship program. We're sort of reinventing the way apprenticeships are done so small, medium-sized companies can do it in their companies. This year, we'll have 36 new apprentices signed up in places and spaces that haven't had an apprentice in 20 years. So that's pretty exciting. We're doing it with online learning and OCC and community colleges and on-the-job training, and we just need companies to invest in their own. And the great thing about an apprenticeship is you'll start it anywhere between $12, $13, $15 an hour, and in 4 years you'll get 26 to 28 dollars an hour, guaranteed. If you do all the things you're supposed to do, learn all the skills you're supposed to learn, you can see it. You can see.
You don't get into trouble.
Yeah, you don't get into trouble. You got stay away from the things that get you in trouble. But the reality is, those are the jobs that are right now are unfilled, and we need them. So we're working hard on apprenticeships. We think it's a part of the solution, apprenticeships. We're also doing a whole lot of things in schools right now. We have an affiliated organization called for Partners for Education and Business. They help reach with career exploration 7,000 students a year. We hold an annual manufacturing day for 300 students went to SRC Tech for the day. And when they see a modern manufacturer, between 75 and 80% of the young people coming out there said, I would be willing to look at or be interested in job manufacturing. So we can change people's view if they walk through a modern manufacturing facility. It's just really cool stuff. So we do things with students. We're pretty excited. Co-locating with us is the New York State School Board Association, which serves the school boards and superintendents of 50 plus schools in the region. They're going to come and work in our space and place. We're going to start doing a whole bunch of things with them. We need to get into schools, and businesses need to be a part of the conversation, because the customer of the schools is actually job providers. Right? When you think about it, when you go to school to get a career, not to go to college. College is a pathway to a career. In my opinion, we got to stop saying, oh, go to college. No, find yourself a career and figure out if going to college is your best bet, because it's huge debt. Trust me, I've got 3 daughters in college. 2 are done. One's on their way out. Another year and a half and off the payroll. By the way, I have 3 daughters. 2 of them are in the manufacturing technology sector. One's an industrial designer and one's a mechanical engineer.
Good for me.
STEM careers are the best bet for future employability, in my opinion. I put STEAM in there, which is art too, because I would have had a starving artist, but now she does industrial design. And she works for, if you know something about Simon Pierce,
Yeah.
she's one of 2 designers there.
Oh.
So I buy her stuff online and give it for Christmas gifts. So, fantastic careers for young people today. They're out there, you just gotta find them. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk about my kids, but I'm kind of biased. We do member services for all of our member companies. We do advocacy. A lot of our, you won't see us necessarily on the front page because we do quiet advocacy. We bring members to speak with elected officials to tell them what's necessary. Listen, you need to know, I gotta be competitive. I don't have a choice. If I can't be competitive, I can't make it here. I'm not trying to exert my influence unnecessarily. I'm just trying to be honest. You know? So we do a lot of advocacy, and we do issue coalitions and so forth. Okay, some new initiatives. I mentioned some of these already. I'm going to quickly talk about Economic Development Council. I know I'm probably over. By the way, I'm not offended if you want to leave. Please do.
Excuse me. I think you need to tell everybody what's happened to your career.
Yeah, so
your
just
evaluation.
recently, it was announced that I became the co-chair of the Regional Economic Development Council, sometimes called the Red Sea, because no one wants to say all that. So the Red Sea, Regional Economic Development Council, is a group of community leaders, all volunteer, that work on our strategic plan for the region and also help manage the URI, the Upstate Revitalization Initiative, which was provided to Central New York, was $500 million. And we annually do a process where we we solicit projects and do investments in our community. And that's happened 7 years straight. So Rob Simpson, who had been in my role before, CEO and president of Center State, had done a fantastic job for 7 years, the longest serving, co-chair, and they asked me to do it now. So I get a chance to do that. I get, no pay, but more work.
Doesn't that take a little time away from your position?
Yeah, it's going to require me to work 2 jobs for a while. But I have a fantastic.
Blend though, both positions.
They work well together.
Blend.
Yeah, I mean, I have after 16 years at MACNY, I have a unique view of the growth, growth opportunities in the public and the private sector. I have kind of a unique background. I worked in local government for 6.5 years in the budget division for Onondaga County. I spent 3.5 years being the executive director of the Samaritan Center, and I served in the military. So I kind of have a varied background that I think provides some benefit to it. And I've lived in this community for 30 years. So my wife and I, for 30 years, love this community. She grew up in Yonkers. I grew up in a little place called West Point, Nebraska, believe it or not. And went to West Point, New York, and we fell in love with Central New York. So I'm going to give you just a couple slides on the progress report for the Regional Economic Development Council. We just briefed the state of our progress over the last 6 years. And I won't spend a lot of time on it. I'm kind of new to the job, but I have been on the council for since its beginning. So I do know what's going on. It's not brand new to me, but the co-chair role is brand new. So our tagline is Central New York Rise. Is on the rise, Central New York Rising is sort of the tagline. This whole sense of Central New York becoming a part of our future. This is actually a drone or unmanned air on the far left, right there. And we have established one of only 7 corridors in the country for unmanned air. So really huge opportunity here. Our goals are to strengthen targeted industries, concentrations that leverage our unique economic assets. We want to improve the competitiveness in and the connections to the regional, national, global economies. We want to revitalize our region's urban cores, our main streets, and our neighborhoods. Those are sort of the top 3 strategic goals that the council has established. Job creation numbers over the course of the rounds of funding. This is sometimes lost. We supported through projects 16,000 existing jobs. Existing jobs matter. You can get a lot of growth, and existing jobs go away. So what? You lose. So jobs retained, specific jobs to those projects, projected job growth, 2,600 jobs created, 1,400 projected jobs are going to be on top of the jobs created for 153 projects. Last year we did 20 projects. You can see the numbers. We do around anywhere between 18 to 38 projects, usually, that there's some economic benefit. And then the return on investment is where it's at. So total awards of about 114 million over those cycles. This is the annual investment that's being done, not the URI dollars, the upstate revitalization dollars. That's different. It's a different pot of money. So about 114 million invested. The total project cost 1.2 billion. Pretty good return on investment. 11-to-1 ratio. Yeah, that's what you want to see. $1 in, you get $11 back. If I could do that in the stock market today, I wouldn't be here. So we've done okay. Not every year you get the same return on investment, 8.3, but it's still a good return. I'll take 6.9. But 1 year 15. So we're doing well. We've been winning in the award. We win a lot of the competitions over time, which is to thank the community members involved and the co-chairs. The other co-chair is city president Daniela Rocarena, who is new to our committee. She's fantastic. She's been here a year. Just kind of give you a sense of the project's investments. This is the leverage of those state investments in total. This is all CFA. So there's a local investment piece that comes through Empire State Development, and then that comes through state agencies. For Department of Labor, Department of Environmental Conservation, all these places in space. So over the 6 years, about $500 million, leveraging to about 2.3 billion. So a lot of investment going on. Sometimes you don't hear a lot about it, but this is helping make our community stronger. And that's just some